Looking this morning at some material from the last few daily Master Course lessons. Days ago, the Merging with Shiva lesson talked about self-realization is in several stages. And the paragraph presents 3 stages, so I'm going to give you a quiz here. Just think in your own mind, mental quiz, what are the 3 stages that Gurudeva would refer to as stages of self-realization? See if you get them right. Give you a second. Oh, the first one, realizing oneself as a soul rather than a mind, an intellectual and emotional type, or a worthless person, gives satisfaction, security, and this is the starting point. We'll come back to each of these 3. So that's the first one. Second one, realization of the self as Ananda gives contentment, a release from all emotions and thoughts of the external world, and the nerve system responds to the energies flowing through the Vishuddha and Anahata chakras. That's the 5th and the 4th chakras. It's the second one. Then we have the third one, realizing the self that transcends time, form, and space. Parashiva is a razor-edged experience, cutting all bonds, reversing individual awareness, such as looking out from the self rather than looking into the self. Reversing means normally we think of, here I am and I'm going within. This is, I'm within and I guess it's time to come out. It's reversing. Well, those are the three stages of self-realization. And it's a useful statement because we don't always run into it in Gurudeva's teaching. Sometimes he just talks about one or the other. He doesn't necessarily go through all 3. But what he's clearly stating here is that it's a natural progression. One naturally leads to the other, which naturally leads to the other. Then also in the lessons in the last few days, Dancing with Shiva lesson 1, we all remember that. That just came around, what was it, yesterday? Huh? Dancing with Shiva lesson 1. Who am I? Where did I come from? Rishis proclaim that we are not our body, mind, or emotions. We are divine souls on a wondrous journey. We came from God, live in God, and are evolving into oneness with God. We are in truth, the truth we seek. Often talking about this verse, I make the statement. The book is called Dancing with Shiva. So naturally, what would you think the first verse would be about? Shiva, right? But it's about the soul. So it shows how important it is that we need to focus not just on something separate from ourselves, but on ourselves and on our spiritual identity. So right in this first sloka, Gurudeva is emphasizing the first stage of realization. We need to see ourselves as a soul. An interesting story about that must have been last year. I've been to the recently created Yogaswami Theravada in Colombo, Sri Lanka, 3 years now, and gave 3 different talks. First year I gave a talk on Sivathondu, being of service, which is one of Yogaswami's very strong messages, being the servant of God. The second year I prepared a talk on this point, that you're not the body, mind, and emotion, you're a divine being. And it's not only the first verse in Dancing with Shiva, it's the first letter that Yogaswami, in Yogaswami's letters. So I was quoting them both. Quoting Gurudeva, and then I was quoting Yogaswami says, you're almost the same thing. You're not the body, mind, you're the intellect, you're the Atma. So it's talking about, it says, Nanyar, who am I? Then it says, Ni Atma. Can't get more simple than that. You are the soul. But what was very interesting is, between the first year I came and the second year I came, they had written something on the wall. It wasn't there the first year. The first year was just opening. Second year it had been there a year, and they had written this letter on the wall. So I was, my Tamil script was adequate enough to figure out that that was the letter I was quoting. Ni Atma. I said, oh, Nanyar. It's up on the wall. So it shows, it's very important to both Yogaswami and Gurudeva, the idea that you're a soul. Well, what does that mean? Gurudeva explains it quite nicely here in this first quote we had. You're a soul rather than a mind, an intellectual and emotional type, or a worthless person. Well, lots of people these days are very active in the intellect, and I was talking to one young man recently, and he was saying he's always thinking. There's not a waking moment that he's not thinking about something, and I told him, well, I'm never thinking. Unless I want to be. But he was so involved in the intellect that he didn't really know how to stop it. And of course, that's not good. We look at the intellect as a tool. It's like the internet. If you're glued to the screen all day, jumping around from website to website, obviously it's a problem. But if you say, I need to know something, you go, you find something, you find it, and then you come out of the internet, you're using it as a tool. Very controlled tool. So the intellect should be the same thing. It should be a tool that we turn on and off to accomplish a specific task. It just shouldn't be running all day long. There's no need for it. And then emotions, obviously the ups and downs of emotions are very distracting from inner life, so we need to learn to bring those under reasonable control. And a worthless person means a negative self-concept. Well, sometimes we grow up thinking other people are better than we are and we're not very good at this and that. We have a negative self-concept. And of course it comes from what our parents say, what our teachers say. It's not something we created on our own. They helped us create it. They were co-creators of this negative self-concept. So if that's the case, we have to work ourselves out of it. And Gurudeva gives us a very fine tool for that, which is called affirmations. And we can change a negative self-concept into a positive one over a period of a few years by regularly using affirmations. But we don't want to stop there. But we do need a positive self-concept. You can't really move from a negative self-concept to realizing that you're the soul. It's too big a step. You've got to move from a negative self-concept to a positive self-concept, and from a positive self-concept into the idea that you're a divine being. We could keep going on that point, but then we never get our parade in this morning. So we're moving on to the second one. Satguru Ananda Gurudeva says, how are we doing on time on this? In my experience, the Anahata Chakra is the resting place of dynamic complacency. Interesting phrase to ponder, dynamic complacency. Normally complacency is not dynamic, but this is dynamic complacency, which I think you could really say is another way of saying contentment. Of thoughtful perception and quietude. This is Anahata, the fourth chakra. Those of a lower nature arriving in the bloom of this chakra are released from turbulent emotions, conflicting thoughts, and disturbances. So that's pretty good, right? Imagine being free of all those turbulent emotions, conflicting thoughts, and disturbances. This to many is the end of the path, attaining peace or shanti. Once one attains shanti, as just described in my experience, this marks the beginning of the path, or part 2, the second level. It is from here that the practices of Raja Yoga take hold once shanti is attained. In the Anahata Chakra and Vishuddha Chakra, Satchit Ananda, the all-pervasive being of oneness, of the underlying being of the universe, is attained and experienced. So that's a clear goal there, and I wrote about it in the publisher's desk. In the last few years, I said an alternative to happiness. Remember that one? That was talking about this idea of the fourth chakra, Anahata, realm of the Anahata Chakra. Happiness, when it comes from external sources, is followed by, guess what? Sadness, right? The coin has two sides. You look at one and you look at the other. So happiness goes down to sadness, or joy goes down to sorrow. When it comes from the outside world, we can't sustain it. It has an opposite. Gurudeva has some nice writings on that. But we're looking for something that's more stable. And that, of course, is this chakra, the inner experience of being content. Permanent contentment. So if we can free ourselves from the disturbances of the lower chakras, the first 3, then we can live in that state. And as Gurudeva says, congratulations. Now you can begin part 2. It doesn't say congratulations, you're finished. It says congratulations, now you can start the serious work. Then we get the third one. Don't want to take too long on this. See what it says. Third one. It is the truth spoken by Vedic rishis as the self within man, attainable through control of the mind and purification. There's a point which I should really mention here. It is not a matter of becoming the self, but of realizing that you never were not the self. What is the self? Parashiva. So when Gurudeva talks of Parashiva, the way I translate it into simple English is transcendent source of omnipresence, consciousness. So omnipresent consciousness, that's something we can imagine. You know, we're conscious through our body, and Shiva is conscious through the universe, and so are we. If we can find that part of us that is conscious through the universe, that's something the intellect can grasp. But that consciousness that's present throughout the universe has a source, and that source is transcendent, meaning it's beyond any possible description. But it's a simple way of looking at it. We see what is being sustained, which is omnipresent consciousness, and that which sustains it is the transcendent source, or Parashiva. And Gurudeva's point here is you're already that. It's not a matter of becoming the self. And that's what I stress through my analogy of the pond of water, won't repeat that one again, but it's part of us is hidden from ourselves, and that part is called Parashiva, and even the part of being omnipresent is hidden to some degree, but not as well concealed, shall we say. How do we find it? It's attainable through control of the mind and purification. So those are two. Purification of what? Purification of the mind is what's meant. It's called Chitta Shuddhi. In Sanskrit, Chitta Shuddhi, and control of the mind is, as in the Yoga Sutras, Chitta Spriti Naroda. Controlling, restraining the mental activities. Control of the mind and purification. Purification is another control of the mind. It's what we call the subconscious mind. What are we purifying? We're purifying the subconscious mind. So we're working with the mind. Conscious mind is that which thinks, generates mental activity. The subconscious mind is there too, and it's the reservoir of everything that's happened to us in this and past lives. And it's, in itself, it generates mental activity. But it also needs to be purified. So the simplest way of describing, I have a whole talk on that. What is the purpose of Hindu practices? To purify the mind. That's a very simple way of looking and explaining. Why do we go to the temple? Purify the mind. Why do we have a homa? To purify the mind. Why do we do seva? To purify the mind. It's a very simple answer to young people as to the purpose. Why do we need to purify the mind? Because it's impure. Why is it impure? Because we didn't act wisely in the past. Very simple explanation. And well, why are we doing that? To find the deeper self within ourselves. Otherwise, we just keep going round and round and round. Eventually, we get tired of the earth, and if we're not careful, might not be here, huh? But watch out for global warming. We could end up without a place to reincarnate. So we don't want to do that. Maybe global warming will motivate us to move ahead more quickly with our moksha. Anyway, that's the idea, very simply said, is self-realization in 3 stages. Realizing oneself as a soul, realizing oneself as Satchit Ananda, and realizing omnipresent consciousness, and realizing oneself as the source or sustainer of that omnipresent consciousness. So thank you very much.